Good afternoon. Thanks for coming here. Very quickly, some technical issues. Can those of you who are listening hear? The first thing is the event is going to be in Spanish. Can you hear? Yes? Okay.
You can find the interpreter in the back of the room. If you don't have your earpiece yet, please pick it up so you can follow the event. Second, we decided not to print publications and concept notes to save some trees, but you have in the QR code in the screen all the materials that we will be making reference to today, publications and so on, but also the concept note and the program for today. Please feel free to download. We will have a busy agenda with 3 different panels, 3 different perspectives, but want to make sure to have time to hear you as well, especially the young. Oh, estoy hablando inglés, perdón. Ya cambié el chip y no lo volví a cambiar. Que está diciendo que tenemos un programa muy apretado, pero queremos también tener tiempo al final del evento para que, sobre todo los jóvenes que estáis en la sala, pero todos los presentes también podáis participar. Así que os agradecemos vuestro tiempo y vamos a dar directamente el comienzo. Vamos a empezar dándoos la bienvenida y describiendo la situación y el contexto del que vamos a hablar.
Talk about. And for that purpose, we have the true experts in the issue. It's a real privilege to have them. Tali Aligada, who's a young person from Chile, and she's the coordinator of the Latin American network of young believers. And we have Victoria Vicente, who's from the network called Além do Acolhimento, and she's going to speak in Portuguese, but she's going to speak very slowly for all of you in Portuñol, and she's from Brazil. So, Dali and Victoria, you've got the floor. I think I have the real challenge of speaking slowly because I happen to be from Chile. So thanks a lot for being here with us, and thanks to all of you. I'm going to start by explaining to you what we're talking about. What is a care leaver, in case you don't know? So in Latin America, when you have things go badly, go awry in home, and the people who should be your protectors fail, they don't respect your rights. At that point, the state comes in and tells you that it has the promise to protect you. Right? And that's why in every country, the system of alternative care and the system of protection, which are some of the terms we're going to bandy about today, sends you to, we could call a residence or a home, a place of protection where you grow up with other kids. But for us, and I want to be emphatic here, what for us is a main mandate for the state to take care of you and to protect you while they fix your family situation. This situation is not the same for a kid or for a teenager. For a kid or a teenager, it's the promise that you're going to soon be reunited with your family. And if that promise, if time goes by and you turn 15, you turn 16, and the promise is not fulfilled, it's a broken promise, which generates a lot of distrust towards the people who should be responsible for your well-being. Our situation of protection is a hostile one. It's not the best situation. Later, the situation where the world considers you an adult because you've turned 18 is also a complex situation. And my colleague will now describe that situation in Portuguese. Hi. One of the biggest challenges we feel alone. We can't get jobs. our first experience, job experience, very difficult. When my experience, when I left, was my house. I spent more time for 10 years in one of these protection environments. I felt very alone, very much apart from my family and from my entire life. What I had known as my life up to then, I didn't have work. I got out of there without any jobs. And it was really difficult because I thought, how am I going to be able to maintain myself? What am I going to do to get work without any experience? And uh, I I had finished my schooling, but I didn't have any experience to get a job. Today, I live in the Young Republic, which is a government program for young people who are care leaver, and there is an excellent program, but it has a lot of weak spots. Not all young people can be there. Not all youth can get into this program. My sister couldn't be part of the Young Republic. She was pregnant, and she needed support most then. She needed more support than I because I wasn't pregnant.
Isso.
And that's what I want to say.
Perfecto.
Perfect.
Bueno, aquí en esta etapa que nos encontramos
In
con
this
desafíos como
stage, where we're facing challenges
la completa
that are
ignorancia,
based
porque
on
no
total
hay una
ignorance,
advertencia previa
because there's
que
no
esta situación va a ocurrir.
early warning
Y
that this situation is going to
es,
come about.
Perdón, si me pueden conseguir agüita.
Can I get a little water, please? A little water?
Aquí, de alguna forma,
Here,
podríamos, esperamos que
one
ciertos
way or
estados
another, we could expect that the
solucionen con
state would
educación, con trabajo,
provide solutions
con algo,
through
con
education
oportunidades,
and water
pero si
and
esas
giving us
oportunidades no
opportunities.
vienen
But if those opportunities
acompañadas,
are not accompanied,
estas soluciones que les digo, que podrían ser de lo más
and these solutions I'm talking
¿verdad?
about could be basic.
No son acompañadas
If
de
they're
un
not
proceso amigable,
supported
un proceso
by a friendly process, a progressive one, an adequate process for every stage of every young person,
no creo que sirvan de mucho.
I don't think they're very effective. It's not that I don't believe that. I've seen that, I've experienced it, and Victoria has too.
Y en estos desafíos
In these
necesitamos
challenges,
un
we
balance
need
entre
a
la
balance
oportunidad, ¿verdad? y el
between
acompañamiento y al mismo
opportunity
tiempo
and
un
support
efectivo desarrollo
and
de la propia autonomía,
development of our own autonomy.
identidad, de gusto, etcétera, etcétera. Me comprenden ya el problema que estamos hablando, ¿verdad?
You follow the problem
Sí.
I'm referring to, right?
Entonces,
Okay.
ahora nos vamos
So
a
now
concentrar en
we're
hablar
going to
de aquellas
focus
posibles soluciones que
on
podamos
possible
encontrar a este
solutions
problema.
to this
Okay.
problem. Okay.
Perfecto, Sofía.
All right, Sophia.
Vení para acá, chicos.
Come over here.
Ven a mi lado.
El micro, por favor.
¿El micro no me abre por aquí?
No.
Bueno, creo que el trabajo de escribir.
Well, I think
qué
the
significa
task
lo
of
que vamos a
writing,
hablar
which
hoy
is
y
about
cuáles son
what
algunos de los
we're going to
problemas, está
discuss
claro,
today,
pero,
I think the idea of the
eh,
problems is now
aquí en
clear.
la ONU y sobre
But here
todo
in the
en el
UN,
Foro de
and above
Juventud,
all in the Youth
estamos
Forum,
para identificar
we
los
are here
problemas,
to
pero también
identify the
para
problems, but
proponer
also to
soluciones.
propose
Todo es
solutions.
posible y tenemos
Everything is
que
possible,
tirar adelante y
and we
encontrar
have to
soluciones
move forward,
prácticas.
and we have to find
Para
practical
ello,
solutions.
vamos a
And
dividir
for
la
that
charla en tres partes.
purpose, we're going to divide
Tienen que venir de
the
muchos sectores
chat
de la
into
sociedad.
three
Nadie
parts.
tiene
The
la
solutions
responsabilidad
must come
absoluta
from
de
different
hacer los
sectors of
cambios
society, and no one has
necesarios y de
absolute
mejorar
responsibility
la
for
vida de los
all
ciudadanos.
changes.
Hemos
And
dividido en tres partes. Vamos
so
a
we're going to
tener
have three
algunas
parts.
ideas de soluciones
We're going to have
políticas,
some
de
proposals
cosas que
of
ya están
political
pasando,
solutions,
de
things
leyes
that
que
are already
funcionan,
underway,
con el
laws that
objetivo
already
de
work,
que
with
los
the
representantes
objective
de gobierno que estáis en la
that
sala
the
y
government
los
representatives who are
socios que
here
estáis en
and
la
the
sala
partners who are
podamos
here
tener ideas,
might
podamos hacer un
get some ideas, and you can engage in copy, paste, and reproduce what already already work. Then we're going to have a panel with academic, programmatic ideas, some standards about how this can be done in a practical basis. And then we'll have a third round table with solutions from the youth themselves. They've already mentioned to us the challenges, but they'll share with us their proposed solutions. And for that purpose, I don't know how we're going to handle the mic. Let me call up John Forrest, who is with us today. I'm going to introduce you and Alejandra Perimetti. She is the National Director for Children's Villages in Argentina. And I'm going to speak to you from here because this is where the mic is. Oops. Sí, pero es una diferencia enorme. Realmente pueden ir subiendo uno por uno a tomar el micro ahí si quieren.
Vale, es que el cable no es muy largo.
No, pero ellos se pueden desplazar al podio para intervenir.
John, ¿quieres venir?
John, you want to come up?
Bueno, te presento mientras tanto.
So, meanwhile, I'm going to introduce you.
Solucionamos lo del micro.
While we try to resolve the issue with the mic. John is the executive director for. He works in Spain. And John, my first question right now, it's a very interesting time in Spain politically in terms of support for youth in general, and from the perspective of legislation and programs, but also with an approach which is rather unusual or not very common, with a focus on young people who are leaving the protection system. I want to hear the position of the Spanish government's Ministry of Childhood and Youth, and to hear how you're addressing the issue and what the best practices you want to share with us are. Okay, well, thank you so much. And first of all, to Children's Villages for having organized this event. For us, it's quite timely to have spaces for reflection such as this one, where we can furthermore exchange ideas and best practices and know a little bit more about what we're doing in each country. Because as we were saying, this is an element which right now is part of the central aspect of the political debate in Spain. Indeed, as Sofia was saying, about a year and a few months ago, we've set up a ministry for young people and children, which is based on pre-existing structures, but it's a good example of political commitment that our government has in promoting the rights of youth and childhood. And it's true that when we got the rank of ministries, when we set up the government, we started to see what our priorities were and what we wanted to promote. This wasn't at the center of the agenda, but the current situation of the country made this a necessity at a time when Europe and the balance of power has seen some backsliding in some of the rights that have been acquired. We wanted to expand our rights and to highlight the rights of such a vulnerable group, which is youth who are unattended. We feel very proud that we stepped into the breach. And in that sense, these protection systems is the center of the debate because of the situation of unaccompanied minor youth, because of the migration routes from Africa. This phenomenon has become a structural phenomenon. We are seeing young migrants arrive, unlike other European countries. This is something we're very proud of. We consider these young people to be unprotected, and so they are part of our child protection protection system, the way they're considered is part of the framework of the Convention of Children's Rights. We are working on this issue, and there's a lot of progress to be made, but that's not our issue here. But indeed, with respect to the transition to adulthood, we have this on the table, the issues of the protection system, and we're asking what happens afterwards. And we were seeing this with such concerning figures such as the figures of poverty among youth. This is a very higher rate than the rest of the Spanish population. And furthermore, we saw that a big problem was the lack of alternatives and a lack of options once people leave the protection systems. And in that sense, we work with civil society who had already done their homework and already had projects, and some of which were financed by our ministry. But it's true that all these experiences were isolated, and our objective has to do with centering on the mandatory nature of these processes in moving towards adulthood.
And this is also something that has to correspond to the socio-educational project so that it can be truly something that benefits children. In that regard, we are currently working on a decree. This is for the welfare or the protection system, and this won't be easy. It's not easy because of the institutional architecture in our state, but it is extremely important to launch this decree, and it will have a number of guidelines for concrete action. I would like to now highlight again the non-discrimination aspect for children leaving the protection system if they're foreigners in Spain and are for that reason in the system, or children that have no families or have had to leave their families because of any sort of situation. We know that this happens, violence, etc. So in that regard, this is a central element that is also part of the work that we're doing at the ministry when it comes to raising awareness. This is a structural matter. This is an issue that is here to stay as long as inequality continues to exist in our world. It won't be easy to find a solution that isn't receiving children with dignity and guaranteeing their rights. Therefore, we have to include non-discrimination as a central pillar for our policies. As we said, that we're always advancing towards the third revolution of the protection systems. The first was the transition from the classic system, the orphanage. That's how the protection systems were called in Spain in the 80s, 90s. We had the harrowing crisis, which really impacted so many working families. And that's the first time that we had to take on children. This was something that the state would do and not just charities or the church. Then we moved on to the strategy for institutions. This was a strategy that was approved by the Spanish government. The objective was to decrease the resources for the homes where the children were living and promote models for fostering in families. Then, once this plan was implemented, and currently we see the favorable results that we've had in a number of territories. As I said before, this architecture is very complex, and the territories are responsible of managing the resources. These are the autonomous communities. But now we've been able to, as part of this framework for the institutions, guarantee that most autonomous communities don't have more than certain number of places for these resources. It's a model that seeks to create greater fairness and equality, and now we are managing the matter of immigrant children. The protection systems with these children that are close to turning the legal age with no other resources in the territory require other solutions. We need to continue to foster inclusivity, and that is what we are currently doing. doing. We understand that this is part of a continuous effort. Some families throw their kids out when they turn 18, so the children that are being cared for by the state, by all of us, can't just stay in the street with no other alternatives when they turn 18 years old. So we understand that this must be a continuous effort which guarantees rights. Just another question for you. I think that this experience is very interesting. And of course, within the European context and in Spain, this is very brief, but not speaking too quickly for our interpreters. But for those that aren't familiar with this, in Ibero-America, there are very new initiatives. There are countries that are launching new bills, that are organizing themselves. What tips or what advice would you provide? What should we keep in mind? What factors lead for a law to be successful, for it to be approved? Or what are the challenges? In just a minute. All of this in just a minute. Let's see. Well, first, young people, children that have been part of the protection system or are in the process of leaving the protection system must have specific regulations for these matters, since they receive different support than other young people, but we can't ignore them when it comes to the policies that we have for childhood and adolescence. We are currently working on a law for children in Spain, and we've worked with different sectors, climate, youth with disabilities, LGBTQ youth. We also worked with young people that require additional protection. This is cross-cutting legislature for all young people, and we want to include all aspects of society. So this is fundamental, and that's how we handle everything. What's most complex? Well, whenever you're working with the government, the most complex thing are always the resources. And we continue to have conversations with the various responsible ministries. But we have to be sincere in this area of social movements, been able to include other organizations, and we found very positive feedback. I didn't share this before. This is a general practice that we have. We had feedback stages. We've been able to work with a number of organizations for youth and for other matters, such as organizations fighting human trafficking, organizations that work with women or with asylum seekers. We've been able to continue that work, and that has helped us to build a better document, which should be published in the following weeks. So the document has been better as a result of this feedback process, and we've been also able to strengthen our network of allies who will later help us implement these policies. We couldn't do this work without them. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, John. So this practice is very interesting. The advice that you've provided is very interesting, and we must make note of all of this and continue to reflect. You talked about the intersectorial aspect of everything, collaboration with different entities, direct participation, and we need to understand that a young person is a young person, but so much more so. So we need to understand all of that. Maybe the ministries deal with separate aspects, but it all comes together with the person, so we need greater coordination. And we'll hear about this later on during the panel. We have another experience from Ibero-America, the other side of the ocean, Argentina. Argentina is the only country in Ibero-America that has a specific law for accompaniment. And we have the luck of having Alejandra Perinetti with us. She cooperated on the creation of this law as part of SOSChildrensVillages. This is a very comprehensive and positive law. So Alejandra, tell us a little bit about this. Inspire us, inspire everyone who can help pass laws. What elements are part of this law, and how was it achieved? Thank you, Sophie. First, I would like to celebrate this forum. The voices of children whose rights have been violated are many times left outside of what is addressed in spaces such as this one. As Sophie said, Argentina is a country where the legislation on children, adolescents, and youth has been an example for many others, and that is why it is the only country of Ibero-America that currently has a law on this matter. So what does this law address? Law 27354 establishes a program to accompany young people. These are the young people that have left or, well, they, during most of their lives, were part of alternative care programs, but they turn 18 and they are forced to leave the program. So what does this law do? I would like to share about this law in two different parts. First, we have the accompaniment aspect. The law states that they will include a mentor or so for each young person. This person can be chosen by the young person. It could be a caretaker, a family member, a teacher from school. The law states that this person may serve as a mentor as long as this person receives training. There is a national training that is offered, and this person must complete it and certify themselves. Why? Well, that accompaniment that is provided to this young person must include all aspects. First, training. This must allow this person to continue down the path for autonomy, and the law states that this starts at 13 years of age. So how long are youth included in this law? From 13 through 21 years of age. If this young person continues their studies, they continue in this path until they are 25 years old. And this mentor has to consider all of the aspects for the person's development. So here we have certain aspects such as living conditions with dignity, employment, health, and many more. Many that I have omitted so that Sophie doesn't challenge me because of the time limit. Now, I said that there were two axes. The second main pillar of this law for youth accompaniment in Argentina, this is for young people that have been living in alternative care systems, is the economic component. We have a scholarship. It is granted to each young person. They start to receive a monthly allowance that corresponds to 80% of the minimum wage in Argentina. This is a monthly stipend that the young person receives. And once the young person turns 18, they have accompaniment with this economic input. So, in a nutshell, this is the law. But we are currently facing a complex situation in our country. I understand the law, and it's amazing. We've heard everything that's been mentioned in the youth forum during the last few years, and it is essential to recognize the topic of mental health, just like housing. Emotional accompaniment, not just the financial support, but the mental support. So what are the challenges here, Alejandra? We have the law, but the problem hasn't been resolved. What's missing? What are the challenges? Well, here I want to tell you one thing. We were talking with John recently about how this law had emerged in Argentina. It was first introduced in 2016 and approved finally in 2017. Then in 2018, it was it was included in the legal code. So in Argentina, it takes some time for the regulations, and this isn't necessarily the time that youth need. So, when we started to draft this law from civil society, we realized that we needed to include the voices of young people. They are the protagonists. Then we started to work on the laws. We sought out political will through the legislative power so that they could give us support, since this was something that we proposed as something essential. When we drafted the law, we wanted everything, all of the dimensions. We wanted the state to take full responsibility. That wasn't possible, but this is a valuable law. And what we really want to address as part of our challenges is that, unfortunately, we still require the implementation of this law to be carried out in all of the provinces in our country. We have a federation, so every single province can take this law and execute it in its own way. And there are still 8 provinces in my country that have not complied with this law. On the other hand, in this economic situation that is very difficult in Argentina, something that we've been dealing with for years now, we have a lot of delays when it comes to granting those stipends. Young people are using these stipends many times to be able to educate themselves, receive training, to feed their own children until they're able to get a job with dignity. And the fact that these stipends are delayed is something very important, significant, that impacts young people in Argentina. To conclude, I would like to say that accessing housing with dignity in my country is almost impossible, if not to say that it is impossible. These young people don't have a support network. They've lost the care that they received from their families. I mentioned that this covered 80% of our minimum wage in our country. There is so much inflation in my country that minimum wage is below the poverty line, and they get 80% of that. Yesterday or the day before, I was listening when we discussed trust in public institutions, and I mentioned that here because the youth of today don't trust institutions. And they don't trust in the institutions because their voices aren't heard. You have to be there because you will be impacted by the situation. We have to guarantee this protection after 18 years of age. That is a right. It's not something that's just handed out. To conclude, if you allow me, I would like to just be completely clear on this. Building a future that is fairer means that no young person can be left behind. No young person can be left alone. This means that we must take on the responsibility of being a society that cares for, accompanies, and gives opportunities to our young people. This is the moment to take action as a society with responsibility, with commitment. Additionally, the opportunities that are granted to these young people aren't just a matter of public policy. This is an ethical decision that must define us as a society. Argentina, is the only country that has a law, so I invite you all I make this law available to you, and I am willing to collaborate with any country in Latin America that's interested in learning more about the experience of a civil society organization so that this law was approved. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thanks so much.
Está claro que se puede legislar.
It's clear that you can legislate and you can engage in public policy for protection, and it should be quality protection. But at the end of the day, Alejandra was saying that this was an ethical decision. But in addition to being an ethical decision, and in addition to being an economic investment, an intelligent economic investment, it's an issue of rights. The right to leave care is the right to a dignified care leaving. The right to employment should be a right to employment with dignity. We can't be partisan about this or ideological. It shouldn't depend on the economic situation of the country. This is a right. And so to hear a little bit about this right and how this can be addressed from a rights perspective, we have our second part of the panel, and we're going to start with a true expert on this issue, Clara Martinez, who holds the chair in youth at the Comillas University. And Clara published a study where she engaged in an analysis, and she did some recommendations for standards and principles which should govern the rights to protection. Clara, the study covers all of Latin America, and there's a specific study on Spain which goes into detail on the local communities, and the issue of territorialization is rather complicated, as we mentioned before. Clara, tell us the conclusions you reached and what these standards are. ¿Puede acercarse un poco más al micro? Sí. Bueno, sí. Gracias. Si lo puede sacar de ahí, lo puede traer.
Bien, entonces decía buenas tardes, muchas gracias.
So good afternoon. Thank you very much to all of you. And so we carried out a study from the chair of children's rights, along with SOS Children's Villages in Latin America, to precisely to go a little beyond what an analysis of the reality is and see what the international standards are. It turns out that the young people's group that leave protection is invisible because the Convention on the Protection of Children's Rights clearly sets forth that it is applicable to people from 0 to 18, but this is such a specific group with such specific characteristics that it gets diluted in the general sea of youth. For us, in our chair, it was a challenge to investigate these standards, and it was very helpful to us to come up with an initial concept about what care leaving is. What is care leaving and what is not care leaving? There are various concepts which are being confused. There are other concepts which are clear, which are it includes those people who are in foster cares and not just in centers. At least we want to have common terms. Where do we come up with these common concepts? From the UN and the interpretation of the Convention on the Rights of Children. That's the most important point. A German psychologist, a U.S. psychologist, said that there's nothing more practical than a good theory. And I think it's worthwhile to make an effort in this regard. I'm not going to defend my role as a university professor, but when you have given a basis to legislation, to public policies, you are legitimized to move forward. Otherwise, we run the risk of providing whatever we can, a government which is more politically sensitive, might decide to give this but has no obligation. The Convention on the Rights of the Child is based on a very clear idea, the rights that are recognized to boys and girls and the obligations that are imposed on states are not based on the incapacity that it's not because kids are not incapable of acting. The rights that are recognized as theirs are theirs because they are people and they are therefore rights holders. The thing is, they need to develop emotionally and intellectually. We shouldn't forget this. The convention doesn't say that they lose these rights when they turn 18, but it's kind of unusual. We had to come up with an international treaty to specify the specific rights of children, but now we have to point out that from 18 on, these people are still rights holders. The state has to continue to protect them. This is part of the international standards. The basic fundamental point has not changed, but the legal form that the states use has changed, but there are some minimum standards that are recognized. These are standards that are anchored directly in the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Why? Because of that continuity that I mentioned, because a person's life is continuous. A protection must be continuous. That means uninterruptedly. It doesn't mean that the rights are the same. We need to see what the best interests of the child are and the characteristics of the person to see what support must be brought. But the state definitely has the obligation to continue supporting these boys and girls. And then there's another point which I think is very important, which has to do with the study of the rest of the legislation regarding the relationship between the parents and the people who are responsible. The parents have the obligation to feed their children, and if that's the case, why wouldn't that be true for those who have been the legal guardians of those children? So why should the parents be obligated to do this and the state not? The fundamental rule is the same. The people who are parentally responsible do this, and so consequently the rights of the kids are fall upon the parents, but when these kids turn 18, the state has this obligation. There's some other points we could mention. And you can, we could, I mean, it can be profitable to invest in this, but I think the human rights perspective is more important. It's clear that this is a matter of rights, and to expand a little bit more about the issue regarding the Forum of Youth and for the young people who are here. Some of you have experience as care leavers and others who have experience as young people and with different realities. Many times we end up talking about why employment is necessary for economic development, and we forget that employment is a right. Why is it necessary to invest in young people's education? We forget that it's a right. So your point is key. Protection, support, inclusion, and participation of youth is fundamental, whatever their specific reality is. This is a matter of rights above everything else. And these standards, How do you see the panorama in Latin America? It's a very complex region with very different realities. Are these rights applied? And what advice can you give for them to become a reality?
Iberoamérica es una
Well,
realidad muy
Latin
compleja,
America
muy
is
grande,
indeed a very complex
muy
reality.
desigual también,
It's very
y
unequal,
unas sí que están en
and
momentos legislativos y de
um,
políticas públicas muy distintos.
they have
Creo
different
que,
public
por desgracia, todos
policies.
comparten un punto en
I
común,
think they
y
all
es que
have a
no hemos
shared
incorporado
commonality. We
plenamente
have not
o en todos en la misma
completely
medida el
incorporated, at
enfoque de
least to the
derechos
same extent,
humanos que hay
the
que
human
incorporar
rights
en la
perspective that
legislación
has to be
respectiva
incorporated in
las
respective
políticas que se hacen.
legislations and
El
in
caso de
public
Argentina me
policies.
está
We have the
viniendo
case
anteriormente, que es
of
verdaderamente un
Argentina,
ejemplo y
which
además
is
es una
truly an
ley
example. And
que
furthermore,
responde
this is a law that
puntualmente a los requisitos
responds to what international standards
en
demand.
España, por
In
ejemplo, se hizo
Spain,
una reforma en el
for
año
example, there
2015 que
was a reform in 2015
se
which
incorporaron algunas
incorporated
tensiones de las directivas,
some
claro, no los
um,
textos posteriores.
request
Creo que se
some aspects
acaba
of the
escapando un
directives,
poco
but I
ese
think
tinte
we
asistencial
are
porque se
losing
hace,
this
se pone mucho énfasis
existential
desde los 16
aspect
años
because
en
there's a
España
lot
cuando
of
empiezan a
emphasis
prepararse para
on
trabajar,
the fact that
porque a los
between
18 se
16
tiene que ser
and
económicamente.
18, people should start to
Cuando, si
get
estamos en
ready to
una
work
visión
because at
centrada
18
en
you
la
need to
cualidad del
be economically
conocimiento,
independent. But if we
estaríamos muy
have a
mal,
support
claro,
perspective,
porque
you might
necesitas
say,
ir a la
well,
universidad,
maybe
tienes que
this
formar
person
una
wants to
familia,
study, he wants to
¿cómo
go to
vamos a
university, he
acompañarle en
wants to
eso?
start a family. How can we support him
Eh,
in that?
Hay avances,
There are
se nota,
points
bueno,
of advance,
aquí va
and
arrastrando los pies, pues se incorpora una guía
people have been
legislativa
foot dragging,
prevista en aquel momento, pero creo que ahora mismo
but
precisamente con el marco
right
al que se
now,
refería antes yo,
with
por
the
ejemplo en España,
framework
pues
John
la
referred
estrategia de
to
desinstitucionalización, el
um,
proyecto de ley de
before,
familia,
there's
el
the
proyecto, es decir,
uh,
hay un montón de
family law,
hechos que
the
tienen que cumplir para enfocar realmente y
deinstitutionalization
utilizar esta
project.
herramienta tan importante, ¿no?
We still have to do more to
En los
deal
otros
with this
países,
important reality. In other
realmente lo
countries,
que voy a destacar lo positivo,
let me highlight what is
todos son
positive. All of
países que
these
han firmado
countries
y
have
pertenecen y
signed
ratificado la Convención
and
sobre los Derechos
ratified the
de la
Convention on the Rights of the bases
a partir de esos
to
cuatro ejes
build
fundamentales.
a system based on these
Dentro de la
four
disparidad se
fundamental
recoge.
axes.
Luego,
There's a
como
great deal
esto,
of disparities,
ojalá
but
se recoja a nivel global, los
hopefully
derechos se tienen que reconocer en leyes,
well, rights have to be incorporated into
cuando
laws.
existe un derecho
And when
hay
there's a
una
right, someone has an obligation.
el Estado,
And in
el
this
Estado
case, the state has
tiene
the
la obligación
obligation.
de
It's not
prestar
that
y
the
hacer todos
state
los deberes.
has the obligation to do everything. This is not
No tiene la
a single
obligación de que eso
responsibility.
se haga,
The
de
state
hacerlo
has the
directamente,
obligation to
puede
get this
contar
done.
y
It could
debe
be
contar
do
con
this
ello.
directly.
Puede
It
contar también con
should
la iniciativa
count
privada
on
con
civil
fines sin
society and
ánimo de
private
lucro,
initiative,
precisamente para la
sometimes
concienciación, por ejemplo,
with a
de los
profit
jóvenes,
motive
para,
to get young people
para
involved.
que se
So
den cuenta también de que
they
forman parte
also realize that they're part of the system and that they can contribute
significativamente
very significantly to their development and well-being. So laws, strategies, budgets, data, and comprehensive measures. And then, of course, health, education, housing, legal advice, etc. Thank you. Okay. We know about legislative processes. We know about rights-based processes. What are the texts? But all of this has to be made practical. It has to be made realistic. So I get up in the morning, I get out of bed. What do I do with my life? I can close my eyes and I think about my 18th birthday or the first month after I turn 18, and I just think of how your day-to-day life was then. What was of concern to you? What did you like? And probably what most of the people here might imagine is different than what someone like Victoria experienced. So we're now going to talk about how these rights are applied. And in spite of the fact that they have programs and that they have budgets and that they have laws and that they have international conventions, and we are all struggling for concepts, theories, and drafting, if we invest so much, things should work very well. But or are things missing? Are there disconnections? which means that these young people's lives is not as easy as we would have liked. And for that purpose, I'm going to call up Victoria, who's going to give us a description how things work in reality. If there continue to be some challenges, I imagine there are, and what are the solutions that someone who had to face these issues in her own life. In the Republic, we realized something very important. It's important to open up spaces for other young people to be included. We have not all the young people who could be there are there. If you're pregnant, you can't be there. There are many young people who experience that and so they need an option to go there when they have no place to go. I believe that every place in every country have to have a republic which can receive young people. We also need support, financial support, psychological support, and we need to, because we need to be ready to move into adult life. And I also believe that these age groups need to be better informed. People, many don't know what happens when a young person leaves the protection system. Nobody knows where those young people can go. Many people, they go into the streets and they end up in because they have no way of surviving and they end up doing bad things. And I think that everybody has to know about us. Everybody needs to hear that we need help, and everybody together, everybody needs to know that we can do something very positive, and something very positive can be done for us. Everybody together, everybody together. And that is not just those people who are wearing a jacket and tie. It includes those people who have the experience directly. So it's clear that there continues to be mistakes in our systems, and we have to listen to the voices who identify these problems. There's a lot of person who knows a lot about this, who has a lot of experience in programming issues, and she's taught about direct help and direct collaboration with young people. Ms. Fernandez is the person in charge of studies in children's villages in Chile. Can you complement what Victoria said based on your experience working directly in program design? How do you translate legislation into practice? What are some of the challenges we haven't realized which really impact young people's lives?
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you for inviting us to such an important event and to discuss this topic. In the case of Chile, we are currently promoting an important effort to change the law so that all young people who turn 18 years of age may receive accompaniment without exclusions or conditions. So as Clara and Victoria have mentioned, I would also like to share the experience of children's villages in Chile, the strategy that we have for young people, and all of the organizations that have been able to work together in Chile since 2023 as part of the Latin America Youth Network. We have been able to also dialogue with representatives of 15 other countries in this intergenerational dialogue and hear more about the practice of the implementation of these practices. So, this is really a program of transition that must focus on comprehensive accompaniment, mental health, education, inclusion in the work market, and many other factors. And what we've been able to observe about the design of this program is that we must consider programs that have different strategies. Specific, a strategy that incorporates previous work or work until 12, 14 years of age for preparation purposes. This should be for adolescents who are currently in foster programs, regardless of what they'll do after they turn 18 years of age. They might go back to their families or not. So we need this type of training program. This is key for development. This is key for daily life. So we see that in many homes, in many places, we see overprotection. A young person is there because the court ruled it, but it is also a young person that goes to school, that goes to activities, that goes out and participates. So we see this contradiction that sometimes makes it difficult to carry out work. If something happens, like things happens to any adolescent, the responsibility will fall to the organization that is caring for them. We also have the strategy for accompaniment from 18 through 24 years of age. We need to ensure that this is available for all young people, regardless of the situation that they are in. There are certain elements that are key here. They're a bit difficult to implement in our countries since it's related to the various public resources that are available. This is not just a specialized service, but we need to understand the role that the Ministry of Housing plays, the Ministry of Education, Social Services, etc. How do they all interact in order to ensure a cross-cutting response to young people? And how can we ensure everything when it comes to intersectionality? There are young people, but there are young people with disabilities, indigenous young people, etc. There are different situations that we need to consider. Therefore, we need differentiated strategies. We need to have flexibility because young people have different characteristics. It needs to be individualized and specific work with adults that know how to work with young people. And we also need to ensure that we build ties to other young people to strengthen support networks. Thank you. It's clear at the programmatic level that there are a lot of possibilities and lessons learned, but I imagine that there are also challenges. Would you like to add more? We've heard the first-hand testimonial, but could you share what else you consider when you're preparing the programs? Well, I think that Dali and Victoria already mentioned some very important aspects, but first, the condition of age can't be the criteria for the state to decide whether or not a young person has to leave the protection system. What usually ends up is that the young person will live in the streets or will go back to a family that lives in a precarious situation. They may fall victim to organized crime, etc. Therefore, we need to generate policies that have this human rights lens. The state took the decision to implement this protection measure to take this child or young person out of their family, but many times the young person ends up in the protection system longer because there is no other family. So the state has the legal guardianship of that young person and must continue with this process. People, we're not just fractions of things. Just because someone turned 14 years old doesn't mean that they will just change in a specific way. But as a person, as an individual, I need to have all of the services available. We need to ensure that these resources are available. It doesn't make sense for there to be protection and then for that person to just lose it all. So this is very important, and I make a call to my country. We need to modify the law for protection services so that young people continue to receive these resources and support.
Have a concrete. How can we correct a law? We have a lot of recommendations, but we're missing the most important recommendations, which are those from the young people who all have participated in the laws, and we've heard about political tendencies, but we agree that this is the youth forum. The people who have the best recommendations are the people who've experienced this and who've lived through this on the front lines. I know that Tali and Victoria have a lot of recommendations because they have a lot of experience. These are their own recommendations, but they're not just their own recommendations. Those are those of thousands of young people. Tali, what's missing? What solutions do you have?
Perfecto, primero agradecer su
Perfect.
tiempo.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thanks for being with us.
Así que se lo agradezco, en serio.
I really appreciate this.
Bueno. Nada de lo que se ha hablado acá,
Nothing
sean
that was said
leyes,
here,
sean
whether it was
programas, ¿cierto?
laws or programs,
Puede ser creado o
can be
va a tener
created
sentido
or
alguno,
will have
sin
any
nosotros,
meaning
sin nosotras,
without us,
sin nosotros,
without
¿verdad?
us,
Entonces,
male and
¿cómo?
female, and binary.
A ver, aquí me voy a tomar quizás un poco la palabra. Para mí,
For me,
Tali, que me ven
Tali,
acá, que llegaste acá hasta Nueva York,
who's already here in New York,
foro de juventud,
in
la verdad es
the
que
youth
no ha
forum,
sido, pero
the
nada
fact
fácil.
is, this wasn't easy
Me
at
refiero al
all.
vuelo,
I'm not
todo.
talking about the flight,
Pero
no.
en la vida,
I'm talking
tomé
about
la decisión
life.
de
When I
decir, ok, voy a
made
tomar
the
esto, voy a
decision
tomar mi experiencia,
to
voy a-
raise my voice,
a volver a mis memorias
to
para
go
poder
back
levantar
in
esto.
my memory, to raise up
Aquí
this
hablo de mi
movement.
experiencia,
And here
pero
I'm
esto es lo que
talking
pasa con
about
los
my
jóvenes
experience,
cristianos,
but this is
como
what
historia,
happened
¿verdad?
with young
Vamos para
people.
adelante,
We are moving forward on this.
que no ha sido fácil.
It wasn't easy. It was
La
not
verdad es
easy.
que no hemos
The fact
visto
is, we have
entre
not
nosotros
seen among us.
bien acompañados,
We have
pares, o sea, la lógica de nosotros es
the-
de
our-
pares todo el tiempo.
Our logic is one of peers
Porque comprendemos muy bien
because
ese
we
sentido.
really understand
Nos hemos encontrado
what
en
that
plenos
feels like.
procesos de estigmatización,
we have faced stigmatization,
de crítica,
we've
¿verdad?
faced criticism.
Entonces, aquí
So
quiero
here,
tomar este espacio
I want to
para
take this opportunity and this
pedirles, quizás,
to
o
request of you
invitarles
or
a que se involucren,
to
¿ya?
get
A
involved,
que vayan a sus países,
to go back to your
ya
countries.
esas voces están,
Today,
existen.
those
Nosotros no las estamos
voices are present, they exist. Perhaps we're not seeing them as much because they're not so involved, but they exist right now. I'm the coordinator of the Latin American network of young care leavers who are the main players in this reality. Because these networks need to be created. Some, clearly, there are some countries where this situation is not even mentioned, even by young people themselves, but there are other countries where this exists. In Argentina, we have the round trip. We have another organization in Chile, in Colombia, in Uruguay.
Unidos por el Cambio en Guatemala.
We have another
Tenemos
network
a
in
Lujuria
Guatemala.
en
We have
Bolivia.
another
Bueno,
network in
Cana
Bolivia.
de
We
Besar
have the
también,
Mexican
tenemos una
network of
de Besar.
care leavers and the Peruvian network of
Están
care
jóvenes,
leavers.
pueden que sean una
So
minoría, pero no hemos
perhaps
pasado la semana hablando de esto. Podrían,
we
¿verdad?
are a
Hemos pasado la
minority, but we've
semana
spent a
hablando de
week talking about
discriminación, hemos pasado la
these
semana
minorities, talking
hablando de
about
género,
discrimination,
y
talking
está
about
súper bien, y
gender,
yo
and
admiro
that's
mucho
fantastic.
cuando
And I have a
veo
great deal of
tantas o
admiration
tantos
for
jóvenes
so
hablando con
many
tanta
young people
potencia
talking
sobre
so
discriminación.
powerfully about their
Yo,
struggles.
en cada espacio que he
And
estado, en televisión,
every
a veces soy el
place
único,
I've been,
muchas veces soy el
I'm
único.
often
Y
the
digo,
only
no veo tanta
care
protección.
leaver, and I don't see so
Pero en
much
protección
discussion
sí
of
veo todos estos otros temas. En
protection,
protección
but
sí veo lo que
all
es
these other
discriminación.
issues affect the issue
Veo
of protection.
género,
I see
veo
gender, I
discriminación,
see
pobreza, o
discrimination,
sea,
I
es el
see
origen.
poverty.
Somos
That's
estos
the
problemas.
origin of many of these problems.
Y desde ahí,
And so from there,
también en los territorios, ¿verdad?
in the
Local,
territories, in
no es
the
necesario
local
a lo
level,
mejor ser
it's not
total
necessary
conocedores
to
del
be
sistema de
totally
protección de mi
familiar
país.
with the
No, estamos
protection
hablando de
system
jóvenes, como
of
tú,
my
como
country.
yo,
We're talking
como
about young
cualquiera de
people like
nosotros, ¿verdad?
any of us.
Y ahí,
And
si les doy algún consejo,
if I
es,
give you,
vamos
if
a
I have one
potenciar sus
word of
talentos,
advice
vayamos a
to give
potenciar,
you, let's
a incluir
and
un
take
espacio,
advantage
incluir
of
un
your
espacio donde
talent.
ellos de
Let's
alguna forma
include young people
puedan
in these
desarrollar y
spaces
decir,
where
ah,
they
mira,
can
esto es lo que quiero ser,
say,
porque yo lo
this is
experimenté de alguna
what
forma.
I would
Ya me
like to be,
incluyeron en mi
but
colegio.
I already
Ya
experienced this. I was
me
already
pasó
included in my
de
school.
ser
My
el o la niña
body
que vive en un hogar de protección.
was no longer
¿Ok?
one of
Entonces,
that kid who
creo
was
que
living
hay
in a
muchas formas de
protected
involucrarse,
environment. There are many
de
ways
ir a
of
los
getting
territorios
involved.
que están
There are
ahí.
many ways to be present in the territories.
Tienen mucho que decir, por supuesto que
The
sí.
young
Aquí
people
en
have a
un
lot to
par de
say.
horas no
Here,
cabe
in a
todo
few
lo
hours,
que
there's no
podríamos, ¿verdad?
space
Compartir.
for all we could have shared. But
Se agradece igual de todas formas. Y agradecer también al DEA el espacio de poder llegar hasta acá también. A quienes quizás
there's some people,
me conocen
perhaps,
y
who
estén
know
interesados en
me
esta
and who
conversación.
got interested in
Ah,
this
bueno.
conversation.
Bueno, eso.
Now,
Muchas
well,
gracias de mi
that's
parte.
all I want to say. And thank you, as far as I'm concerned. And
Perfecto. Bueno,
perfect.
llegamos hasta aquí
Now,
presencialmente,
we got,
Victoria y yo, pero
Victoria and I
también
got this
tenemos
far,
algunas voces
but
de
we
algunas
also have
compañeras,
some
compañeros
voices from some
que
colleagues of
se
ours
sumaron
who
a esta
joined
llamada a través de
this
una declaratoria.
appeal
Hay un
for a
manifiesto, ¿verdad?, que
declaration.
queremos
There's a
compartirles
manifesto
para que
which
de
we
alguna
want to
forma
share with
tengamos
you.
más
So
claro el
for
panorama
us
de
to
cuáles
have
de cuáles son las
clear
principales
what the
recomendaciones
panorama
por parte
is of those
de
recommendations from us.
Aqui só pode estar Tali e eu. mas
Tali
tem
and I are the only
jovens
people, but there are
internos
thousands
para
of
trazer suas
young
vozes
care
aqui.
leavers, and to
Fizemos
bring
uma
our voices
declaração
here,
que vamos
we have a
compartilhar.
declaration which we're going to share.
Nós jovens que deixamos,
The young
deixamos o
people
sistema de
who are
proteção,
leaving the
representados no
protection
Fórum da Juventude
systems
do ECOSOC
present in the
2020,
ECOSOC
criamos essa declaração
Forum on
com
Youth,
base nas
come up
declarações
with
do
this
primeiro Congresso
declaration based
Internacional
on the
de Jovens Guerreiros
statements of the
Comunitários
first
na Índia em 2020,
declaration
do quinto
of
Congresso
young care
Latino-Americano de
leaders in
Jovens
India in
Guerreiros,
2020, in the
ratificado em
fifth
2021
Congress
e em 2023, e
in
no
Chile in
seminário Minha Vida para o
2023, and the
Desenvolvimento,
Mia
no
Via
Brasil em
in
2024.
Brazil in
Realizada com 15 jovens
2024.
guerreiros de 15 países da
And from
Ibero-América.
15 Latin
Aos
American
estados
care
liberais
leavers in
os jovens egressos do sistema de proteção em
Latin
todo o
America.
mundo enfrentam barreiras estruturais
We face
para uma
structural
transição digna e adequada
barriers
para a
for a
autonomia.
dignified
A falta de
transition to
acesso à
autonomy,
moradia,
the lack
educação,
of
emprego,
housing,
saúde mental,
education,
redes de apoio e
employment,
acompanhamento
and
eficaz
support
após a saída afeta nosso
after
bem-estar e
our
desenvolvimento.
exit affects our
Fazemos
well-being.
apelo
We
urgente aos
appeal
estados e
urgently
organismos
to states
multilaterais
and
para
multilateral
projetar e
bodies
implementar
to
políticas
project and
públicas
implement
de cuidados
public policies
alternativos que
of
garantam
alternative
o princípio
care
da
that will
necessidade e
guarantee
adequação.
the principles of
O direito de viver em família
adequacy,
e as
the
condições
right to live in one's
adequadas
family
para o
under
cuidado de
adequate
qualidade.
conditions
Além
for
disso,
proper
políticas
care. In addition,
específicas para a
specific
saída
policies
planeada
for
devem assegurar uma
supported
transição gradual e
exit
planejada,
in a planned way,
com apoio psicossocial,
with
econômico e proteção
economic
social,
counseling
garantindo
and
pleno
psychosocial
exercício de nossos
counseling,
direitos durante todo
with
o
the
processo de autonomia.
full exercise
É
of
hora
our
de
rights
romper o
during
ciclo
the
da
autonomy
exclusão
project,
e garantir que cada
and to
jovem
guarantee
egresso do
that
sistema
every
de proteção
young care
tenha acesso às
leaver
mesmas
has access to the
oportunidades que
same
seus pares que
opportunities
cresceram em
as
ambientes
his
familiares.
peers who grew up in families. Thank you.
In this video that we will be sharing, we're going to hear the voices of other young people from Ibero-America. They'll be sharing their situations, and this is an opportunity to hear more young people.
Planos individuais e um orçamento suficiente para garantir uma transição digna. Para isso, é fundamental contar com apoio, moradia, educação, emprego e saúde mental. Solicitamos estratégias de monitoramento e salvaguarda que protejam nossos direitos. Queremos que a preparação para a saída comece aos 14 e continue até os 25 anos, com acompanhamento profissional, gestão de caso, planos individuais e um orçamento suficiente. Para garantir uma transição digna, para isso é fundamental contar com apoio, moradia, educação, emprego e saúde mental. Solicitamos estratégias de monitoramento e salvaguarda, que protejam nossos direitos e promovam nosso bem-estar, e que a coordenação entre instituições seja fortalecida para que os serviços de proteção respondam a nossas realidades.
Egresar no puede seguir siendo sinónimo de abandono. Exigimos transiciones justas y estructuradas, donde las redes familiares, cuando sea posible, comunitarias y sociales, sea una garantía, no un privilegio. Estas redes deben de contar con apoyo financiero y psicosocial real, no como un gesto de buena voluntad, sino como un derecho para construir sociedades más justas. No podemos normalizar que jóvenes sean empujados a la exclusión, la explotación o la violencia por la falta de políticas públicas. Es urgente contar con programas de vivienda individual y colectiva como parte de una transición real hacia la autonomía. Es fundamental el acceso a empleo digno, educación financiera y medidas que garanticen estabilidad y rompan los ciclos de vulneración que enfrentan los egresados. Tener acceso a una vida digna no debería depender de la suerte. Exigimos compromisos reales para que egresar no signifique quedar a la deriva en la lucha por sobrevivir.
Para construir un futuro necesitamos educación y empleo. Queremos formaciones para habilidades de la vida. Bases educativas para técnicos y estudios superiores y formaciones de orientación vocacional. Es importante crear alianzas con empresas y universidades para la capacitación y memoria y acceso al empleo. El emprendimiento debe apoyarse también con formación y microcréditos. Quienes tenemos discapacidad o vivimos en zonas rurales, también necesitamos oportunidades de educación y empleo adaptadas a nuestras necesidades.
Pedimos el acceso a salud integral, seguros médicos y atención psicológica y gratuita, que sean continua y especializada en caso de necesidades específicas, que no se nos interrumpa el tratamiento psicológico y psiquiátrico a la hora de egresar. También queremos apoyo en salud mental y psicosocial y protección contra todo tipo de violencia. Es urgente reforzar los protocolos de salvaguarda para asegurar que ninguna persona joven quede desprotegida durante su transición de la autonomía.
Necesitamos nuestra documentación legal básica antes del egreso, información sobre nuestros derechos y acceso a programas de apoyo y protección social. Queremos certificados de egreso que faciliten la burocracia, base de datos nacionales de egreso que nos permitan acceder a becas, empleo y asistencia social por al menos 3 años después del egreso. También que la edad de egreso se extienda hasta los 25 años, porque la autonomía no se logra de inmediato al cumplir la mayoría de edad.
Pedimos que respeten nuestras raíces, nuestra identidad y nuestra historia de vida. Necesitamos redes de apoyo, mentoría y acompañamiento comunitario durante la transición a la autonomía. Queremos que nuestra voz sea escuchada y tomada en cuenta en el diseño y monitoreo de políticas públicas. Queremos fortalecer las redes de personas egresadas para promover el apoyo mutuo, contar con espacios de liderazgo, participación e incidencia política para influenciar los cambios que necesitamos.
Of thousands of young people that leave the system without support, we hope our voices are heard and our words become sustainable public policies. This should not be a jump towards the unknown, but a bridge that includes support and resources. With the help of the civil society, we can create vulnerability into opportunities. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Well, I believe everything has been said. We don't need to add anything else. I will just repeat the phrase that access to life with dignity should not just depend on luck. I think that we all agree with that. We have very little time left. When there's so much to say, time just flies by. But I want to see if there are any reactions, maybe a question, proposal, someone that learned something, someone that got excited with the video, someone that has an amazing political proposal or program idea, maybe funds to help out. Reactions, anything that you want to ask Tali, Victoria, or the panelists. And I know that in the room we have a lot of colleagues from government, so we thank you all for your time. I will give the floor in a moment to our colleagues from Cuba. If I'm not mistaken, we have Mircia Rosard with us. I hope I didn't mispronounce your name, the chief of the department of the UJC committee. Oh, it'll be her colleague. Okay, I'll let her introduce herself then because I don't have the name on my paper. So please go ahead. We have very little time left, so just 2 minutes for your quick reaction. Thank you. I am from the island of Cuba. I lead the Center for Youth, and I've been working with the young people in our country. In Cuba, we have a code for young people and youth from 1998. We approved this law that applies for foster homes and protection centers. This has been evolving in my country. Before, we used to talk about families and other elements. In Cuba, these homes, well, there are 54 with 493 young people being fostered, and we would like to say the following. When they turn 18, we want them to have all of the conditions and to leave in the same manner as children with families. When they leave care at 18 years of age, they should have access to housing to continue with their lives if they don't already have housing. And if they want to go to university, they can do so with financial support, with the opportunity to continue while they're studying, receiving support. In 2024, we approved a no code for families, which includes topics of independence, autonomy, and we also talk about other elements, other rights. This year, it's been 35 years since we ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and we hope that we will be able to reformulate it with the voices of young people, of adolescents and children. Cuba complied with the rights of children with the revolution. Today, despite the current conditions, we have approved a comprehensive policy for childhood, and in this moment, we are currently drafting a new legal code for children and adolescents in the country. Therefore, I invite you to learn more about the reality that children experience in Cuba, and we are also making a call to hold a summit on children and youth in the country called Building the Future, because young people are building the future, and that starts today. So we will defend their autonomy. Thank you so much. Another good practice, another law that we have to review, and I'm sorry I got confused with the name. Now, we have very little time left. If there is a brief comment, something urgent that needs to be mentioned, and if not, we can just talk later. We'll be here after the event. My name is Ricardo Salgado. I am from Honduras. And Ricardo, if you can just take the microphone, please. Well, thank you so much. My name is Ricardo Salgado. I am from Honduras, and I would like to thank you all the opportunity for holding this space for youth. This is a very important initiative, especially for those people that are covered by the social protection laws. In Honduras, since 2012, we established the framework for social protection. This is an initiative that stemmed from the governments of Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. It's a tripartite policy. However, I believe that it's focused too much on institutions and how institutions work, and not really on how this social protection is given. That's something that I was remarking on with my colleagues. Many times, public policies should work the other way around. Young people, adults, youth adapt to the social policy, and the policy doesn't really adapt to the needs of the population. So I think that this is a significant challenge that we all face. How can we give children a voice when sometimes they can't speak yet? They're so young. So I think that this also falls on mothers, on on broken marriages, on the issues of the 21st century, on so many topics that are interlinked. And that's why we really need to address the complexity of these sectors in the public policy. So I think that this is a dialogue that is still pending, and even more so, we all have to go back to our various spaces and think about how we can improve, on how we can incorporate other good practices. So thank you from Honduras, from my colleagues from Nicaragua, that we can be here present. And once again, we want to just create more spaces. Our colleague from Cuba, if we can receive invitations to these spaces, I think it's very important for all the microphones to turn on in those situations. Thank you. Thank you. Another very interesting reflection. Microphones on. That's the policy here in the Youth Forum, and of course the policy that we follow at SOSChildrensVillages. I was going to summarize. I don't think it's necessary. Again, we have very little time. We have the video. You just saw. It's on our website. You can watch it whenever you want, as many times as you want. And I forgot to say at the beginning, thank you to everyone who was with us online. We had a lot of people connected from different countries. Thank you again to those who joined virtually. And lastly, thank you to the permanent mission of Uruguay, to the United Nations, our co-sponsor, the government of Spain, the permanent mission of Spain to the United Nations. You provided a lot of support for this event. Thank you to the permanent mission of Chile as well. To all of those who were present and gave us your time this week, all of those who will go back home and start working on the topic of care leavers, all of you, of course, thank you so much.